Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, Korea and China agreed to launch joint efforts before the end of the year to curb illegal fishing in their shared waters after a number of violent confrontations. South Korea's rival parties lock horns over civic groups flying of anti-Pyongyang leaflets as they grill top government officials on national security and foreign policies. Plus, 13 years after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the World Trade Center has officially reopened for business. Daybreak begins now.
Hello and thanks for joining us to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, November 4th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, Korea and China have agreed to conduct joint surveillance in the West Sea to crack down on illegal fishing by Chinese nationals in Korean waters. Korea's Fisheries Ministry said on Monday that the two countries will begin patrols before the end of this year. Talks on the issue were delayed after a Chinese fishing boat captain was killed last month in a clash with Korean Coast Guard officers who had raided his vessel. It's the latest in a series of violent incidents between the two sides in recent years. In 2011, a Korean Coast Guard official was stabbed to death during a raid. Over 1,800 Chinese boats have been seized for illegal activities within Korea's exclusive economic zone over the last 5 years. Turning now to Korea's National Assembly, where the country's two main rival parties were at loggerheads on Monday over the government's foreign and security-related policies. Lawmakers were particularly divided over the government's stance on the launching of anti-North Korean leaflets by South Korean activists. Our Chae Yu-san has this report.
At Monday's interpellation session, the opposition party urged Seoul to intervene and stop South Korean civic groups from launching flyers that criticize the North Korean leadership across the border. The anti-North Korea leaflets have become a major obstacle in improving inter-Korean relations, with Pyongyang accusing Seoul of scheming against the regime, leading to their failed high-level talks late last month.
Severing inter-Korean dialogue because of the leaflets is being very narrow-minded. It's a digression from long-awaited conciliatory mood that has been established after a long impasse.
Opposition lawmakers also raised concerns about North Korean threats against the safety of South Koreans living near the border.
We have no legal basis to control the leaflet launches, but we are taking appropriate measures when problems arise related to public safety or from internal conflict.
The Prime Minister, as well as the ruling party, criticized Pyongyang for citing the leaflets as the reason that led to failed talks. As for delaying the deadline for Seoul to regain wartime operational control of its troops from Washington, the ruling side said the decision was necessary for South Korea to better counter against North Korean nuclear threats.
The government should create a task force of experts to come up with a detailed roadmap to secure a defense budget needed for the command control transfer.
While the opposition side demanded President Park Geun-hye apologize for failing to fulfill her campaign pledge, the Prime Minister said it was only right for Seoul to postpone the handover until a condition is achieved where Pyongyang drops all its nuclear ambitions. Chae Yu-san, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea has developed a new type of tactical missile after making improvements to a Soviet-era missile which is capable of carrying nuclear, chemical or biological warheads. Non-proliferation expert Jeffrey Lewis, who is working for the 38 North website, which monitors North Korea's nuclear activities, he says the missile was tested at least twice northwest of the North's eastern coastal city of Wonsan in late June and mid-August. August. Now, this missile is believed to be an extended range version of the Soviet SS-21 Tokcha surface-to-surface missiles developed by Moscow back in the 1970s. Lewis says Pyongyang could develop a new series of long-range ballistic missiles based on this Soviet-era model. South Korea and the Netherlands have inked a number of deals to strengthen cooperation in the areas of nuclear energy, scientific research and agriculture. The two sides also officially signed an agreement on a $23 million project to upgrade the capacity of an experimental reactor and to build a cold neutron research facility in the Netherlands. A Korean consortium won the bid for that project back in June, and work is expected to start in May. Now, as you can see there, the Dutch King, Willem-Alexander, is here in Seoul, and President Park promoted her peace initiative in Northeast Asia to him, adding that Korea and Japan are important partners for peace and prosperity in the region, but that efforts are continually being made to try and resolve issues surrounding Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of thousands of Korean and other Asian women. Now, it is a very important time politically in the US right now, because crunch midterm elections in the United States are scheduled to be held on Tuesday local time. Now, 1/3 of the Senate, 36 state governor positions and 435 seats in the House of Representatives will be up for grabs. Several opinion polls show the Republicans will likely win a majority in the House and the Senate. Currently, the Democratic Party has a majority in the Senate, while the Republicans have more seats in the House of Representatives. Now, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, a total of 147 ballot measures will also go before voters on election day. They will range from topics as far-reaching as the legalization of marijuana, abortion, all the way to gun sales and even food labeling.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
It's that time of the year again when the lawmakers in Korea's National Assembly thrash out the details of next year's budget, and the rival parties are already locking horns on whether plans to boost spending by over 5.5% next year will be enough to boost the slowing economic recovery we're feeling here in Korea. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Discussions on next year's budget have begun at the National Assembly, with the ruling and opposition parties promising to pass it by the legal deadline of December 2nd. The 2015 budget calls for a 5.7% on-year increase in government spending to some $350 billion.
We must meet the legal deadline, as it is our last best opportunity to boost Korea's economy.
The ruling Saenuri party says the budget promoted by the government as necessary for boosting the economy must be kept intact. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has been stepping up its attacks on the government's recent expansionary fiscal and monetary policies, promoting its own plan instead.
We have 5 principles set for next year's budget: endorsing financial health for the central and local governments, restoring corporate taxes for conglomerates, increasing household income, and securing a bigger budget for safety-related purposes.
Compounding concerns about the increased budget plans, the government has been facing a shortfall of tax revenue since 2012. According to the Finance Ministry, the government collected $126 billion in national tax revenue from January to August, which is down to $178 million from the same period last year. And while both parties are speaking in optimistic terms about the budget being passed by December 2nd, Korea's parliament is notorious for its year-end budget wars. No budget bill has been passed by the legal deadline since 2002. However, that won't be the case this year, as parliamentary law revisions made last year mean the draft proposal will be automatically referred to the regular session on December 1st, even if the rival parties don't reach an agreement on the bill. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
One of Samsung Group's oldest founding companies is set to go public by the end of this year, and this is setting the stage for more Samsung affiliates to quickly follow their lead there. And it also paves the way for Samsung Electronics to establish a holding company early next year. And our Song Ji-son explains what Korea's biggest conglomerate is hoping to achieve through this process.
Seoul Industries, the mother company of Samsung Group that was founded 6 decades ago, is going public. Seoul filed for an initial public offering of around $50 per share to the Financial Supervisory Service on Friday, with plans to go public on December 18th, earlier than the market forecast of the first quarter of next year. Samsung's IT services subsidiary, Samsung SDS, also filed for an IPO next Friday, with a starting stock price of $185 per share. Market analysts view this as a means of speeding up the group's restructuring to found a Samsung Holdings company that could eventually shore up control for the conglomerate's family members. One of the most plausible scenarios is that Samsung Electronics splits in two in the first quarter of next year, with one becoming a holdings company and merging with Seoul Industries. Now, why go through with this process? Because this way, the heir apparent to the Samsung throne, Lee Jae-yong, who owns a quarter of Seoul Industries' share as its biggest shareholder, can minimize inheritance taxes with his share of Seoul stocks dropping to 8%. At the same time, he increases his influence in Samsung Electronics as his current share of 0.6% jumps to that same level. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's two biggest automakers by far, Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors, have agreed to pay $100 million in fines and forfeit $200 million in credits for misleading customers about the fuel economy of over 1 million cars sold in the US. The fine, which was announced on Monday in the US, is the largest in the 50-year history of the so-called Clean Air Act. The Korean car makers agreed to the fines after the Environmental Protection Agency and the Justice Department found that they had misled consumers about fuel economy and greenhouse gas emissions on several models, including the popular Accent and Elantra. After gas prices jumped very much in 2008, Hyundai enticed customers by saying its cars got 40 miles per gallon in highway driving. The EPA found the inflated claims involved about 1.2 million vehicles. If you could travel any place in the world, where would you go? Well, for Koreans, the top answer is Europe. In a survey conducted by travel site Expedia on 1,000 working men and women in their 20s to 40s, more than 34% picked Europe as the top destination for travelling without a package deal. Coming in second place with 30% was Southeast Asia, including countries like Thailand and Singapore. Places a little closer to home came in third, with 27% opting for Taiwan, Japan or China. The number of one-person households in Korea has been on the rise in recent years as an increasing number of young people choose to delay or even completely forego marriage. This relatively new demographic has sparked off a so-called solo economy and a wave of new consumer trends. Our Park Ji-won reports.
Single-person households now make up more than 25% of Korea's total households. Statistics Korea says the ratio will increase to 1 in 3 by 2035. The rising number of singles in the country has begun to make an impression on the economy, and their distinct lifestyle is changing the landscape of the consumer market. For example, home appliance companies have been keen to cater to their special needs, rolling out products like mini rice cookers and small-load washing machines to slimmer refrigerators. The businesses say solo dwellers prefer appliances that are well equipped with multi-functions in refined and compact designs. Increased revenues for convenience stores is another indication of the growing presence of single-person households. Recent statistics by the Bank of Korea show the amount of credit card transactions from January to July at convenience stores this year has increased about 15% from the same period last year, while large chain retailers saw a decrease, largely due to a slump in consumer spending after the April fair disaster. Analysts say an increase in sales for convenience stores is closely linked to the purchasing habits of single people. The purchasing power of solo dwellers has turned out to be stronger than that of 3 to 4 member households, according to the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. As the country's population of single people continues to grow, so has demand for single-person housing units and personal finance managers to help them prepare for their senior years alone. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, New York's World Trade Center has reopened for business more than 13 years after the original towers were destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. Employees at publishing giant Condé Nast have already started moving in to the 104-story One World Trade Center. The $3.8 billion skyscraper took 8 years to build and is now the tallest building in the U.S. More than half the space is leased already, and the government's General Services Administration has signed up for a lot of floor space there as well. The 541-meter tall skyscraper also includes a memorial in the footprints of the old towers and a museum. Over in Japan, efforts are underway to make it mandatory for mountain climbers to fill out a hiking declaration form before they hit the trail. If implemented, the new law could see violators hit with fines of up to $500. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
In September, more than 50 people died when Mount Ontake, a popular hiking destination in central Japan, erupted without warning. Rescue workers raced against the clock to find those missing, but it was hard to identify them since most had not registered before setting out on their treks. It took authorities 2 weeks to get the full list of hikers on the mountain after combining information from police, the fire department, and local governments, and looking into every car parked in the area. A hiking declaration form is present for climbers at the trail entrance, but only a few bother to fill it out.
It is not mandatory. We want them to fill out the form to protect themselves, but in reality, hardly anyone does.
The hiking declaration form is an essential resource for search and rescue operations in the event that climbers get lost or go missing. Last year, among 2,100 mountain accidents reported in Japan, only 370 hikers had filled out the form beforehand. In light of the recent Mount Ontake eruption, efforts are underway to make it compulsory for hikers to submit the declaration form. 20 local governments, including those with active volcanoes like the prefectures of Nagano and Shizuoka, are working together on setting the law. However, resistance is expected as hikers could face up to $500 in fines for not filling out the form. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off in the KBO, where the 2014 Korean Series between the defending champions Samsung Lions and the Nexon Heroes will begin later tonight. And with the Korean Series Media Day taking place on Monday afternoon, experts all agree that it's Samsung's experience versus Nexon's big bats. But at the same time, Samsung without Oh Seung-hwan in the pen looks more vulnerable compared to the previous seasons, while Park Byung-ho and Seo Gun-chang look to break out of their postseason slump for any chance at beating Samsung. Meanwhile, Game 1 starters will be Rick Vandenherk for the Samsung Lions and Andy Van Hecken for the Nexon Heroes. And now shifting over to Jeju, where the 95th National Sports Festival came to an end on Monday, but not before the most valuable player was chosen after 7 days of the competition. And with the sports writers voting in on this year's MVP, the award was given to archer Kim Woo-jin, who broke 2 world records during the National Sports Festival. The 22-year-old broke the 70-meter men's recurve record with 352 points, followed by a new world record in the 30, 50, 70, and 90-meter medley competition on the following day, breaking his own world record from the 2010 Asian Games. And now moving over to football, where the Korean national football team's head coach Uli Stilike announced his roster for the upcoming November friendlies. And with manager Uli Stilike stating that he chose players he watched himself, former Arsenal striker Park Ju-young has been chosen in the latest roster. With Park finally signing with Al-Shabaab of Saudi Arabia is given another chance under manager Stilike, as Lee Gun-ho was also chosen thanks to his great form with Al-Jaish in Qatar. Meanwhile, the national team is set to face off against Jordan on the 14th, followed by Iran on the 18th. And now over to Monday night's KBL action. We had one game take place as the Goyang ORIONS took on Wonju DONGBU PROMY, so let's take a look at the highlights. Now, DONGBU off to a great start, taking a 25-16 lead after the first quarter before the ORIONS rallied to tie the game 43-43 going into halftime. But DONGBU's offense come alive in the third quarter, outscored the ORIONS 26-12, led by Anthony Richardson's 20 points and 6 rebounds, as DONGBU takes this game 85-76. And now finishing things off in the V-League, where the Korean Air Jumbos and the LIG Graders played the only match of the night over in the Men's League. Of course, going into the match here, LIG looking for the upset here, take the first set 25-23, but Michael Sanchez tears it up on the offense for Korean Air as he puts up 43 points, helping the Jumbos take the next 3 sets, including a thrilling 4th set, with 64 points being scored between the two teams, as Korean Air Jumbo takes this match 3-1. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, it's another cold morning we are waking up to. It feels like early winter again, but it's expected that the cold should be eased up a bit this afternoon, with highs rising to a tad milder than yesterday, reaching to upper teens in many areas. And lots of sun will dominate the whole peninsula all day long, but note that the dry weather advisory has been issued here in the capital, so be sure to stay hydrated by drinking plenty of water and apply a good amount of moisturizer to your skin. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the low in many areas are starting out in the single digits again, and Seoul kicked off at 5. Then the daytime high will be topping out at 17, while Daegu, Gwangju, and Busan will be climbing into 18 this afternoon under lots of sunshine. Now, on to other regions. Jeju Island and Daejeon will be getting up to 16 later on. Dokdo peaks at 15, while Mount Kunggang only reaches at 8 this afternoon. Well, be sure to dress warmly before heading out. And that's all for Korea. And here's international weather for viewers around the world.
light autumny note, that's going to do it for now. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour. That's at 7 a.m. Korea time. Thanks ever so much for watching.